A quiet Brooklyn street. A man on a simple errand. But when four thugs tried to make him their next victim, they didn't realize their target wasn't just any man. It was Jason Statham. The afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the cobblestones of Dumbo, Brooklyn. It was a neighborhood caught between two worlds. The rusted skeletons of 19th-century warehouses stood defiant against the gleaming glass of new art galleries and overpriced coffee shops. The air, thick with the scent of salt from the East River and roasting espresso, vibrated with a low, urban hum. Through it all, Jason Statham walked with a familiar, purposeful stride. He wore a simple gray Henley, dark jeans, and heavy leather boots that seemed molded to his feet. His shaved head and the intense focus in his eyes gave him an aura of coiled energy, a man who wasted no movement and no thought. In his right hand, he carried a small, surprisingly heavy wooden box, its corners reinforced with brass. Inside was a custom-machined pinion gear, a masterpiece of steel and precision destined for the differential of a vintage Jaguar E-Type. It was a simple favor for a friend. A quiet day. But quiet days in New York are a fragile commodity. Up ahead, a modified Dodge Challenger, painted a violent shade of electric blue, was parked haphazardly, its rear wheel mounted on the curb. The bass from its speakers was a physical assault, a low-frequency earthquake rattling the windows of a nearby bakery. Leaning against its polished hood were four young men, a loose-knit crew radiating the kind of bored menace that festers on hot afternoons. The leader, a wiry man with a spiderweb tattoo crawling up his neck, watched Statham approach. His eyes locked onto the antique-looking wooden box. He nudged his friend, a brawnier man in a basketball jersey. "Yo, check out Old Man Moneybags," the leader sneered, his voice loud enough to cut through the music. "What you got in the box, Pop?" "Your retirement." Statham didn't break stride. His eyes remained fixed on his path, treating them as nothing more than a temporary obstruction. This dismissal was a greater offense than any insult. "Hey! I'm talking to you." The leader pushed himself off the car, stepping directly into Statham's path. His crew fanned out, forming a crude semicircle. "Show some respect. We run this block." Statham came to a slow, deliberate stop. He didn't look angry. He looked inconvenienced. "It's a public street," he said, his voice a low gravelly tone. "Move." The leader laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Make me." He reached out, his fingers aiming for the wooden box. It was the last voluntary move he made. In a blur of motion too fast to properly track, Statham shifted his weight. As the thug's hand came forward, Statham's free hand shot out, not to block, but to seize the man's wrist. He twisted it in a sharp, biomechanically perfect arc. A wet pop echoed in the air as the man's shoulder dislocated. Before a scream could even form, Statham used the man's own momentum to spin him around, slamming his face into the unforgiving brick of the adjacent warehouse. The leader crumpled to the ground, a heap of stunned disbelief and agony. The second thug, the one in the jersey, pulled a box cutter, its blade extending with a cheap click. He lunged. Statham pivoted on the ball of his foot, letting the lunge pass by an inch. He brought his elbow up in a vicious, rising arc that connected squarely with the man's jaw. The crack of bone was sickeningly audible. The man's eyes rolled back as he collapsed, unconscious before he hit the pavement. The remaining two froze, their bravado evaporating in the face of such brutal efficiency. From inside a black Cadillac Escalade parked across the street, a man with a jagged scar bisecting his left eyebrow watched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He saw the last two thugs hesitate, then turn and run. He watched as Statham calmly picked up the wooden box, gave it a brief inspection for damage, and continued his walk as if nothing had happened. The man in the Escalade, Leo, the scar, pulled out his phone. His voice was a low, venomous hiss. "He just dropped my entire crew. One guy. Find out where he's going. And get everyone. I mean everyone." The quiet day was officially over. Leo's rage was a living thing. It wasn't just about his crew getting humiliated, it was about the disrespect. He had carved out his territory in this neighborhood through a carefully cultivated reputation for disproportionate violence. Fear was his currency, and this lone stranger had just bankrupted him on his own block. His authority, as fragile as a pane of glass, had been shattered. His phone calls were a cascade of fury and threats. Within 20 minutes, the response was underway. 3 black SUVs, an Escalade, a Navigator, and a Yukon, converged from different corners of the borough. Inside, more than a dozen men answered the call. They weren't elite soldiers, they were a motley collection of street enforcers, muscle-bound thugs, and desperate young men looking to prove themselves. They grabbed whatever was available: aluminum baseball bats dented from previous encounters, heavy industrial chains, tire irons, and crowbars. 2 of the more senior members tucked handguns into the waistbands of their jeans, the cold steel a comforting weight against their skin. This wasn't about a fair fight. This was about eradication. Miles away, the source of this storm was oblivious, stepping into the cool, cavernous interior of Sal's Classic Restorations. The air inside was a cocktail of motor oil, welding fumes, and old leather. Skeletons of classic cars, a half-restored Porsche 356, a skeletal Mustang fastback on a lift, filled the space. Tools lined the walls in a chaotic but functional order. Sal, a stout man in his late 60s with grease permanently embedded in the lines of his hands, wiped his brow with the back of his arm. "Jason. You made it. Any trouble?" he asked, his voice a warm Brooklyn accent. "Nothing to speak of," Statham replied, placing the wooden box on a clear workbench. "Here's your gear. Looks like the machinist did good work." Sal picked up the heavy steel component, admiring its clean lines. "A thing of beauty. This Jag will finally run like a dream. You want a coffee? I just made a fresh pot of tar." Statham was about to answer when a subtle change in the atmosphere caught his attention. It was the sound, or lack thereof. The usual city symphony of distant sirens and passing traffic had been replaced by the low, predatory rumble of V8 engines idling just outside. It was a sound that didn't belong. He glanced towards the large, grimy bay door. "Trouble's circling back, Sal." Sal's smile faded. "What are you talking about?" Statham's eyes narrowed, scanning the entrance. He could see the silhouettes of the SUVs boxing in the narrow alley. "Go to the back office," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Lock the door. And don't come out." Sal, who had known Jason for years and had only heard rumors of his past, saw a look in his friend's eyes he'd never seen before. He nodded, his face pale, and hurried towards the small office at the rear of the garage. The roll-up door rattled as someone outside slammed a fist against it. Then, the sound of car doors opening and closing in unison. Boots crunched on the gravel outside. Leo emerged from the lead SUV, a red bandana tied around his head. He had changed into a sleeveless vest to display the crude tattoos covering his arms. The scar on his face seemed darker, angrier. His crew fanned out behind him, a pack of wolves ready for the kill, their makeshift weapons held with a mix of aggression and nervous energy. "We know you're in there," Leo roared, his voice echoing in the alley. "You messed with the wrong people today. You wanted to play the tough guy. Well, the whole team is here now. Game over." Inside the garage, Statham slowly rolled his shoulders. He gently pushed the precious Jaguar gear to the back of the workbench, out of harm's way. He looked around the garage, not with panic, but with the cold, calculating gaze of a craftsman assessing his tools. And he was surrounded by tools. The metal bay door shrieked as 2 of Leo's men forced it upwards, flooding the dim garage with harsh afternoon light. The gang poured in, spreading out to encircle the lone figure standing in the center of the workshop. Their numbers gave them confidence, a swaggering certainty that this would be a quick and brutal lesson. Leo stepped forward, a smug grin plastered on his face. He pointed a heavy tire iron at Statham. "Look at you. All alone. Nowhere to run. Any last words?" Statham didn't answer. His gaze flickered from man to man, processing threats, angles, and opportunities. His eyes fell on a heavy-duty torque wrench lying on a nearby toolbox. The first thug, a mountain of a man wielding a baseball bat, charged with a guttural roar, swinging for the fences. Statham moved with deceptive speed, sidestepping the clumsy swing. In one fluid motion, he snatched the torque wrench from the toolbox. He didn't swing it. He used it as a shield, deflecting a blow from a second attacker armed with a chain. The chain wrapped around the wrench. Statham yanked, pulling the surprised thug off balance, and drove a vicious kick into his knee. The joint buckled with a sickening crunch. As the first man recovered to swing his bat again, Statham ducked under the arc and drove the steel handle of the wrench hard into the man's ribs. The air left the man's lungs in a pained gasp as he staggered back, clutching his side. "Get him! What are you waiting for?" Leo screamed, his grin replaced by a flicker of disbelief. The garage erupted into a maelstrom of violence. Two men rushed Statham from opposite sides. He dropped the wrench and grabbed a heavy brake disc from a stack. He spun, using the disc like a discus, and hurled it at one attacker. The solid iron rotor caught the man square in the chest, sending him crashing backward into a shelf of oil cans. He turned to face the other, who was lunging with a crowbar. Statham grabbed a hanging engine hoist chain, swinging on it to deliver a devastating two-footed kick that sent the man flying into the half-finished Mustang. The chaos escalated. One of Leo's senior men, positioned near the entrance, pulled a handgun. "I've got him," he yelled, leveling the weapon. Statham was already moving. He kicked over a rolling oil drain pan, sending a wave of slick, black fluid across the concrete floor. The gunman, startled, took a step back to steady his aim, his feet slipping in the oil. It was the only opening Statham needed. He closed the distance in 3 explosive strides. Before the man could fire, Statham slammed a knee into his wrist, sending the gun clattering away. A follow-up elbow to the temple sent the gunman slumping to the floor, unconscious. The sight of the gun being so easily neutralized sent a wave of panic through the remaining attackers. Their coordinated assault devolved into a frantic, disorganized free-for-all. Statham was the storm at its center, a whirlwind of calculated brutality. He used a discarded fender to block a knife thrust, then slammed its edge into the attacker's face. He ducked a wild swing from a tire iron and used the attacker's momentum to throw him headfirst into the sturdy steel leg of the car lift. In less than 90 seconds, the garage was a landscape of groaning, incapacitated bodies. Only a handful of terrified thugs remained standing, their weapons held loosely, their confidence utterly shattered. Leo stood frozen near the entrance, his face a mask of sweat and sheer terror. His tire iron felt useless in his trembling hand. "Shoot him! Somebody shoot him!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. Another thug near the back managed to draw a second pistol. Bang! The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet whining as it ricocheted off the engine block of the Porsche. Statham spun towards the sound. He didn't run. He walked forward, deliberately, picking up the pistol the first gunman had dropped. He checked the magazine, saw it was loaded, and racked the slide, his movements economical and sure. He pointed the weapon directly at Leo. Leo flinched, raising his hands. Okay. Okay, man. You win. The remaining thugs dropped their weapons, their will to fight completely gone. But Statham didn't pull the trigger. With everyone watching, he calmly pressed the magazine release, letting the full magazine fall to the concrete floor with a clatter. He then pulled back the slide, ejecting the single live round from the chamber. It spun in the air before landing near Leo's feet. He tossed the now empty pistol onto the workbench. "I don't need this," Statham said, his voice cold and flat. That single sentence broke them. It was a statement of such absolute, terrifying superiority that it was more intimidating than any bullet. The remaining thugs scrambled over their fallen comrades, desperate to escape the garage. Only Leo was left, trapped between the wreckage of his crew and the unmoving figure of Jason Statham. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily closer. The swift, anonymous 911 call from Sal had done its job. Statham gave Leo one last, dismissive glance before turning and disappearing through a rear exit, melting back into the urban labyrinth just as the first NYPD patrol car screeched to a halt in the alley. 2 days later, the 84th precinct was buzzing. The official report was a logistical nightmare, a dozen known associates of a local street crew, all requiring medical attention for injuries ranging from broken bones to severe concussions, found at a single location. The crime scene at Sal's garage was a tableau of contained chaos. The stories from the conscious gang members were rambling, contradictory, and frankly, unbelievable. They all spoke of a single man, a ghost, a demon. Detective Mike Delaney sighed, rubbing his temples as he stood behind the two-way mirror of Interrogation Room 3. He was a 30-year veteran of the force, a man whose weary eyes had seen every flavor of human depravity. He was cynical by trade, and a one-man army narrative sounded like a desperate, coordinated lie to save face. Inside the room, Leo, the scar, sat hunched over, his arm in a sling, a fresh set of stitches tracing the line of his famous scar. His pride was more broken than any of his bones. "Let's try this one more time, Leo," Delaney said, his voice crackling over the intercom. "You're telling me that you and 12 of your guys, some of them armed, were taken down by one man. No weapon, no backup. Just one guy." Leo stared at the metal table, his jaw tight. He gave a single, resentful nod. "So who was he?" Delaney pressed, leaning closer to the mic. "Some ex-special forces operator. A rival crew's secret weapon." Leo finally looked up, his eyes haunted. "He wasn't just some guy," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. He was Jason Statham." Outside in the observation room, 2 junior detectives who had been listening in burst into laughter. "Statham? The actor," one of them guffawed. "Is this guy for real? Maybe The Rock was his backup." But Delaney didn't laugh. He fell silent, his expression unreadable. He had seen the preliminary report on the recovered security footage. It came from a deli on the corner of the first incident, the one with the 4 thugs. The footage was grainy, shot from a bad angle, but it was clear enough. He walked back to his desk, past the chuckling officers, and pulled up the video file on his monitor. He watched the digital ghost in the gray Henley dispatch 4 men with a terrifying economy of motion. He saw the shoulder dislocate, the elbow strike, the chilling efficiency. He then pulled up the file from the garage's exterior camera, which caught the final moments, Statham calmly disarming the pistol, ejecting the round, and tossing the weapon aside. It wasn't a fight, it was a dissection. The laughter in the precinct died down as other officers gathered around Delaney's monitor, watching the silent film of brutal poetry. The smirks were replaced by wide eyes and low whistles. The myth from the interrogation room was suddenly backed by chilling, undeniable proof. Delaney minimized the window. He knew this report was going to be a bureaucratic nightmare. How do you write up a dozen aggravated assaults committed by an international movie star who was, by all accounts, simply defending himself? He leaned back in his chair, a slow, grudging respect dawning on his face. The streets of Brooklyn, he mused, were full of surprises. But this was one for the history books. The story couldn't be contained. Leaks from the precinct, combined with whispers from the terrified gang members and Sal's discreet account to a trusted few, started a firestorm online. Grainy clips from the deli security camera went viral on TikTok and Twitter, looped and slowed down, analyzed by everyone from martial arts experts to action movie fans. Hashtags like #StathamStorm and #BrooklynBeatdown trended for 48 hours straight. The incident became an instant urban legend. Far from the digital noise, Jason Statham sat on a weathered bench in Brooklyn Bridge Park. The late afternoon sun glinted off the towers of Manhattan across the river. He was nursing a black coffee from a paper cup, his expression as impassive as the stone piers below him. He hadn't sought this attention. He had simply reacted to a problem. For him, it was over. A hesitant voice broke his solitude. "Excuse me, Mr. Statham?" He looked up to see a teenager, maybe 17 or 18, standing a few feet away. The kid was dressed in worn-out sweats and running shoes, a gym bag slung over his shoulder. He had the lean, hungry look of a fighter and a fresh bruise under his left eye. "I saw the videos," the kid said, his voice a mix of awe and nervousness. "Everyone's talking about it at my boxing gym." "What you did?" Statham gave a slight nod, taking a sip of his coffee. The kid shuffled his feet, emboldened. "I just have to ask, why? I mean, why did you do it? You're Jason Statham. You have everything to lose. You could have just walked away, called the cops." Statham finished his coffee and placed the empty cup in a nearby recycling bin. He turned back to the young man, his gaze direct and serious. "Let me ask you something," Statham said, his voice low. "You fight?" The kid nodded. "Boxing. Golden Gloves amateur. And they teach you to hit the heavy bag, to work the speed bag, to build your strength," Statham continued. "But what's the first thing a good coach teaches you about all that power?" The boy thought for a moment. "That it's for inside the ring. That you don't use it to be a bully on the street." "Exactly," Statham said. "Strength isn't for showing off, it's for protecting. It comes with responsibility. When you see something wrong, something ugly and dangerous that's about to hurt someone else or yourself, you have two choices. You can look away, or you can stand your ground." He paused, his eyes locking with the kid's. "Sometimes, staying silent is the same as letting the bullies win. It's a different kind of weakness." The young boxer stood straighter, the words sinking in. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by a look of understanding and determination. "I get it," he said softly. "You've got heart," Statham observed. "But heart isn't enough. It needs discipline. It needs purpose." He stood up, ready to leave. "Where do you train?" The kid named a well-known but underfunded community gym a few miles away. Statham nodded. "Be there next Saturday morning. 7 a.m. sharp." He started to walk away, then paused and looked back. "And don't tell me what you can do. Show me." The young man stared, speechless, as Jason Statham disappeared into the flow of the city, leaving behind not an autograph, but a challenge. A chance. The fallout for Leo, the Scar, and his crew was catastrophic. Humiliation proved to be a more effective weapon than any fist or bullet. In the world of street gangs, reputation is everything, and theirs was now a joke. The story of how a dozen of them were dismantled by a single movie star spread like wildfire, stripping them of their aura of fear. Rival crews mocked them, and their own members began to drift away, unwilling to be associated with such a legendary failure. The effect on the community was just as profound. The bodega owner who used to pay Leo protection money suddenly found the courage to say no. The residents of the street where the first confrontation happened walked with a little less fear. A single act of defiance had shifted the balance of power, proving the neighborhood's phantom menace was just a bully who folded at the first sign of real strength. The incident became a modern fable, whispered in bars, debated in barbershops, and endlessly replayed online. Jason Statham never made a statement. He didn't grant any interviews or acknowledge the event in any way. His silence only amplified the legend. He wasn't seen as a vigilante or a hero seeking fame, he was seen as something rarer, a genuinely strong man who, when tested, refused to back down. He was a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to be a victim and stand up to what's wrong, right in front of them. This story raises a lot of questions. Was he a hero, or did he take the law into his own hands? What would you have done in that situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, but please, in the spirit of the story, comment with respect. If you believe that one person's courage can make a difference, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to see it. And for more incredible true stories you have to see to believe, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.